All right, we're recording to the cloud. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Charles Randolph, and this is another wonderful VSTE Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion webinar. Today we have our wonderful presenter, Miss Amy Jackson, that will be presenting today on professionalism. And today's date is March the 3rd, 2021. Just for housekeeping things, all our wonderful attendees, if you could, make sure your camera is turned off and also make sure your microphone is muted. So that way Ms. Jackson would be full screen and while she shares the content. And also too, this information or this video would also be shared via the VSTE website. And to kick it off, Ms. Jackson, it is all yours. I'm gonna mute my wonderful camera and my microphone now. It's all yours, Ms. Jackson.
All right, well, hello everybody. Thank you all for coming. This presentation is over professionalism. It is part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion webinar series that we are starting to do. I thought that this would be one of the most important things to kind of talk about in this time, especially with a lot of us going back to our campuses. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have multiple screens open, so if you chat with me, I can see your questions, so you don't have to unmute, but you are more than welcome to chat with me and ask me questions throughout. All right, so this is entitled Being the Calm in the Storm, Maintain Calm, Transparency, and Control During Times of Technological Difficulties. I know that technology is great until it is not. A lot of times we have things going on and we are either as the teacher in the classroom, we have to figure out how to get our students back on track. Or if you are on the tech side of it, you're working in the technology department, or you are in ed tech and you're working with teachers, you have to understand the steps that you should take in order to get everything going. So I want to take you back to the beginning of this school year. If you remember the beginning of this school year, everybody who used Google in any way that first week of school was a disaster for us. Google decided that they were going to do some things and lots of our students weren't able to actually log on or be able to participate in their virtual learning. And every district handled it differently. You wanted to make sure that you were letting parents know what was going on because it was new and you didn't have students in the building. And even if you did have students in the building, they couldn't access anything. And when a big system like Google goes down, you are definitely stressed. The tech department is stressed. Anybody who helps with ed tech or just regular tech, you're trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we assist our students? How do we communicate to our parents? How do we let our faculty and staff know? And you have a lot of hands in the pot. So as we talk about the rest of this presentation, I want you to think about those times during the school year when you have had issues with technology and how you responded, or how your district handled it. So these are the four things that we'll be talking about. These are not really they're really a circular thing. They're not like a 1, 2, 3, 4 step. It can really go in phases depending on how big the situation is or how long it takes. The most important thing is always to identify the source of the problem. In most cases in the tech world, these are uncontrollable. We do not have very much control over how they started, but all we can do is figure out how it started and then where to go from there. I want you to think about tech problems like an emergency room. You will have urgent situations, things that can cause long-term and immediate damage that need to be taken care of immediately. And then you have emergent situations, things that are important but aren't an immediate threat. So Google being down is urgent. We need to take care of that right away. Seesaw being down is an emergent issue. It's not something that stalls the rest of the district from being able to function in a way that is appropriate or acceptable. So that's something that you can take your time to work on. It may affect a couple of teachers or a few assignments, but it doesn't fully shuts you down. I remember when Google made some changes to how they communicate with the LMS systems. You could put in an assignment, and then they changed how those assignments were accessed by students, and so there were a lot of people who your students couldn't get to things. So that would be an urgent situation, something that your tech director and those involved would immediately get on. The very next important thing that has to be thought about is how are you going to respond? Who are you going to share information with? How is that information going to get out? Less is always more in this situation. Whoever is going to be doing this, I would suggest that they have a very calm presence about them, so that when they are sending out those messages to parents and staff and community supporters, that they can hear the calm in your voice, because you have to be able to let people know that you have the situation under control. Even if you are still investigating and learning what's going on, you do need to be able to show that you're able to take control of the situation and handle it. You also want to make sure that you are not sending out too much information. You don't want your audience to be desensitized to your message. One district in particular in Region 1, about every hour they sent out an update. After about the third hour, when it was the same message, people stopped responding and listening to those messages, which then creates an issue where when it is resolved or there is something that needs to be done on the user's end, they don't get it because they have shut you out because it was too much information. Be very careful and strategic about what information you provide. Remember, if you give out backdoor tricks to students, parents, or staff, they now have that backdoor trick in their toolbox. So if you allow students to be able to circumvent a certain setting because that's the workaround in the moment, remember that the next time they have that error, they know that workaround, and you may not want them to have that workaround for future use. So you have to be very careful about how you give out that information. You want to know the roles and responsibilities of each person on your team. They need, in urgent situations, everyone on your team should know what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, and how they follow up with you. If you are the teacher, you don't want every student in the classroom to come to you and say, Google is down. Once you know Google is down, you should have students in your classroom, just like they have regular jobs in the classroom, where one student may continue to click on Google to see if it's coming up. Another student may be responsible for taking down error messages. If you are on the adult side of it, you want to make sure that the people who can actually fix the issue are the ones who are not being bombarded with phone calls, because we all know in our districts, our teachers know who works on what things, how to get a hold of them, and people build relationships, and you know that they can be bombarded with phone calls and other items. Make sure also that you are clear in what you want them to do. A lot of times in urgent situations, we tell people to do something and it may not necessarily be the full scope. So that's where we take into account where we debrief with our staff, because we want to make sure that we can either prevent or mitigate this error or issue in the future. Having a follow-up meeting, it is always best to have a cross-functional team, meaning you have somebody from every viewpoint to help you create this debrief team. So your tech department would be there, teachers would be there, maybe even a parent supporter. So if you have someone that who is possibly a teacher and a parent, so if it's a quick turnaround, especially with us doing virtual learning, you need to know how it affected kind of everybody and what some of the mitigating factors were. After this, I believe that it helps you create a failures book. A lot of times in education, we don't like the word failures because we feel like it means that somebody didn't do something that they were supposed to do or you weren't your best. But failures are not bad, and it is a part of tech. It is also part of you building a long-term support system for your division. Failures book can help you see what can go wrong and how you would handle it or how you did handle it. It's also a good book to have in your department so that if anybody comes in, they're able to see, oh, we had this issue before, this is how we responded, this is how we go forward. I know that earlier in the month, end of last month, the district I'm in had an issue with ClassLink. We fixed it on our end where we gave a backdoor trick for our families and staff to be able to get around it, but ClassLink still had a lot of information to do. So that's something that as we think about training our students and our staff next year for when we have our ed tech lessons, this is something, if you get this error code, this is something you can do, but only if you trust this website or only if you have these specific things in place. So those are the 4 ways to gain control. One of the things that I like to do as part of the debrief session is to think about a SWOT analysis. And this is a very loose idea of the SWOT analysis. It's not typically what a lot of people would see or use. You have to think about your strengths. That's always the first part that you want to highlight. What did we do well? How did we do it well? Who can we spotlight in this moment? Because your team is who is going to help you keep going. So if there was someone who really shined, you're able to say, thank you so much, and you want people to know that they are valued. You also want to look at your weaknesses. Where do we have gaps? Where could we have done a little bit better so that we don't have those issues again? Especially if there wasn't something that happened, a technological issue that happened that could have been prevented. How do we recognize that weakness now, and how do we fill it? And then opportunities. What can we implement or what can we reconfigure in order for us to be better? A better team, a better response, just offering a better product. A lot of times when you think about when you have a lot of issues with a product or a company, you want to be able to say, these are the issues that we had with them. This is why we need to start to look at other places to provide these services. And then threats. How can this happen to us again? If we're going to continue to use this product, how do we mitigate this issue? How do we get it to where it doesn't affect us long term or in a way that is detrimental to our students, our staff? So that is the conclusion of my presentation. I was told I had to keep it within 10 minutes. I think I did it. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to unmute yourselves or to put anything in the chat, and I can answer questions to help.
I only got one question, Miss Amy. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
That was some great tips right there. Especially, I think I like the note down your mistakes. That was a good point. Oh, Miss Amy, looks like you getting some feedback in the chat.
I see that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times in education, we don't take things from the business world into education. And I know that a lot of, especially our tech department and our ed tech department, it is a business. We are working with lots of products, lots of vendors, lots of outside things. And we really do have to think about how do we navigate this world. And there are times where when COVID happened, I know that my previous team and I, we spent lots of time together on Zoom trying to figure out and troubleshoot and prevent issues from happening in the future. So I think that it is always a great thing to have a failures book and to think about where are we going, what do we do, how do we combat these issues. It's a lot of work on the front end, but it really does help us in the back.
So just checking with our wonderful attendees. If anybody else has any questions, you can put in the chat. And then also we'll make sure to share this on the VSTE website under Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion link. And also we'll make sure we have wonderful Miss Amy's information up too. So in case you want to contact her, is that okay, Miss Amy? They can contact
Absolutely.
you for PD professionalism questions.
Yes.
As schools are getting ready for the end of the school year, which is amazing, and next year. You're getting some great comments. We got a wonderful presenter from last week, even saying good job.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Ms. Morris from last week. So we have more webinars coming up. Our wonderful team has some more coming up. I think we have another one this month, and then we got a few more coming up the next few months as we go into from winter to spring.
I think we have a question.
Question, go ahead.
Ms. Vasquez, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. Good morning. I just wanted to say the part that really stood out to me was, highlighting and recognizing those who have, recognizing those who are part of the team who have strengths. I think that's one place that is really important, because that helps us, especially when you're looking at your SWOT analysis. That may be actually be the part of the strengths that you had to avoid some of those other issues. Actually looking, and especially when you're in a leadership role, it's real important to be able to supplant your weaknesses, and first of all to recognize that you have weaknesses, because we're not all perfect, and then to supplant those weaknesses with people around you who are strong, and then recognize their effort. That's very, very important.
Yes. Oh, yes. If you are working with technology, you have weaknesses galore.
And I have to say, I think even with this year or past year, I think the self-awareness of strengths and weaknesses have been more aware, just not even as a professional part, but also internalizing and personal. I think a lot of staff have realized, hey, I could not do something before. That's a weakness. I need to work on it, and a lot of self-reflecting.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I definitely think to go with that, and what Ms. Vasquez said, being virtual this year really helped a lot of leaders, I think, understand what was urgent and what is emergent. Because when we were in person, if a teacher called and said that something was down, it was like everybody ran to try to fix that thing. And now it's like there's so many other things that need to be adjusted. A lot of teachers see now too, my issue is important to me, but in the grand scheme of things, there may be something else going on where they can't get to me as quickly as I would like. And I didn't say it, I meant to, we always have to think about, if we're using technology, there always has to be a backup plan, whether we are in person or virtual, because if one thing isn't going to work, you got to pick up and keep going instead of kind of shutting down. And I think that is always a good thing in the classroom for people to think about, is have multiple ways for you to be able to get something done, especially if you're virtual.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Even before all this wonderful, our technology, our gadgets, our computers, our panels, and all that stuff, it still comes to good teaching, good planning, and as you've said a couple of times, having a backup plan. Because if you've been in education more than a month, you have to have a backup plan.
Yes.
So that is a good point. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Because we're trying to keep it timed, because we know everybody is educators. And I don't see any more questions. So, Miss Amy, I have to say thank you very much for accepting our wonderful challenge for presenting. We appreciate it. I'm gonna give you a clap. You can also give a virtual clap on your Zoom too, but I'm gonna give her a physical clap because she did a great job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Glad you presented. And again, we have more coming up on the webinars for the rest of this season. So stay tuned and check it out, and have a great day of learning and teaching with your wonderful students. And also, hey, if it's a nice day, get some fresh air. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop this wonderful recording, and everybody have a great day.
Have a great day, you guys. Thank you for coming.